Welcome everybody. This episode we're going to be talking about icons and tooltips with Material UI. These are going to go hand in hand because we're going to make a little icon that when you hover over it or click it, a little pop-up shows up saying some information. This can be handy to add more information to a page without polluting it with a bunch of text. Now before we get started with this video, I wanted to give a special thank you to our sponsor. Are you looking for a file uploader that works well with React? FileStack covers everything from simple file uploading to image transformations. Check them out, I'll leave a link in the description. So you can find in the documentation icons just by searching icon, and there are thousands of material icons you can use. And there are variations which are nice for different site styles. We are going to install icons material, so we'll copy this and install that here. Once we have that done, we can try to import an icon. It's going to be very similar where we have a default import here and then we say where we want to get that from with a slash. So icons material slash info, for example. Now to use this, we will just have an info component and this can be self-closing. Now taking a look at our site, we now have an icon right next to the view orders. Is it the most beautiful thing in the world? No, but it doesn't mean we can't be happy about the progress we've made. The same pattern is exactly what you will do for any of the other icons that you want. So import whatever the icon name is from icons-material slash whatever that icon is called. So let's say we wanted a representation of a user or a person. You could search that and grab whatever one you like. Let's go with filled. And we'll just go with person here. So I like this one. You can see the different sizes and examples. So this is a person icon from slash person. And interesting, you can change the name here because it's a default import. So I'll show you that in practice, but what we'll do is we'll actually copy this, paste, and now we can use a person icon. Let's go ahead and do that at the top. So inside of the div, we will say person icon, close that. And now this is what our site looks like. Now just some basic JavaScript stuff. Because this is a default import, it means that we can import this with whatever name we want. So I could say import icon 2. It has the same from, so we can now just use it as person icon 2. And that works exactly the same way. Would you want to do that? Probably not, but that is why this code is working fine. We have person icon, even though the import is called person. So if it helps with clarity to have icon in the name, then go ahead and do that. Now to make this smaller, what we can do is we can see these different attributes. And we can say font size, and I'm going to go with small. This now makes a much smaller icon. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to put it in line with the name, so that it shows up on the left of John Smith here in this example. To do that, we can replace this paragraph by just removing it or putting it as a span, which is not going to create a new line. And then these will both be in the same line. And in fact, you could take the span and surround both of those if you wished. So now, this is what our site looks like so far. Yeah, pretty ugly, but we're working on it. Let's go ahead and get rid of this info icon. We're not going to use that. I'm just going to use this person icon. So we will remove info. And after the div, I want some space. So what we could do is we could say style. And to do inline styling, you're going to use 2 curly braces. So you'll pass in an object with properties, one of which can be margin, and we'll say bottom. And let's say we want to set this to a value, say 20. That's going to give a little bit of space here, but I want to add a bit more. So let's try the value 40. And now things are spaced out just a bit better. Now you can actually do some of the spacing and stuff with Material UI, but we're going to stick with what we just did for now. The next thing I want to do is get this person icon to be in line with the customer name. If you take a look at it now, although these are within the same line, you can inspect you can see that here, the icon fits in that a little bit differently than the John Smith. So it's a little strange. The bottom of the icon in that little square there is directly in line with the bottom of the text. Here is a good solution for this that I found on the internet. So what we can do is we can just add these styles to that div and they should be in line. So shout out to this guy. You can type these out. It's not that long, but I'm going to copy them and I will apply that to this span here like so. Now take a look at our site. It looks sick. I'm going to add some margin to this person icon. So let's go ahead and do that here. Margin. And I'm going to actually do margin right. And I'll just set this equal to something like a small value like 5. And I'll give a little bit of space between these. Now here's an example of creating a tooltip in Material UI, and they actually use an icon, which is quite handy. So we're going to surround the icon with a tooltip component passing in a title, which is what actually shows up when you, in this case, hover over it. So let's go ahead and import that tooltip. This is not going to come from icons. It's actually going to come from material directly. So I'm going to space these out so I can easily separate the things imported from material from the icons. And this was called tooltip. And we want to make sure that we import this from the correct thing so that we're not also making a button here. Tooltip. Now let's go down and surround our icon with that. So here is our person icon. We'll say tooltip, close, and then take the closing tag and move that below the icon and then give this tooltip a title. And I'll just assign it an example here for a second. You can now see that when we hover over these, we have an example pop up, which is quite cool. So let's take this ID now and place it inside of that pop-up. We will no longer have example. Instead, we'll have customer dot underscore ID, and this is an ID object from MongoDB, which needs to be converted to string. Lastly, we can remove the ID from being displayed down here, and let's check out our final result. We now have a list of customers with the name. We can hover over the little person icon to get the ID, which we could copy if we needed. And we have their industry, and then a button to view their orders. Last thing I want to do, since we are building some more complex structure around each individual customer, I want to break that out into its own component. So basically everything inside of this return should be a customer component, and then we could remove all this code. So where do we put components? I believe the recommended location is actually right here for Next.js. So we'll say components, and then inside of here we can say new file, customer.tsx, and we'll say const customer, assign it an arrow function, and then export default customer. Perfect. Now in here, let's go ahead and display that information, but we need to first take props, default that to any for now, and we'll say return. Let's go ahead and take the code that we had earlier, so this entire div, we will cut, bring over to our customer component, we will paste, and then instead of customer, we would use props.customer. However, so we don't have to change all of our code, we could destructure. So it's going to look like this now. We are going to take the customer property from props. How are we going to deliver this customer? Well, over inside of index, we will return a call to customer, passing in the customer object. So each iteration of the loop, this is going to refer to a customer and it's going to be passed to this component, which can be self-closing. This will need imported. So import from components, customer. No problems on this page. Now all we have to do is take all those imports that we had up here and move those over to our new component customer. So import here. Now the only problem is the type of customer. We already have defined a customer type. In fact, we defined that right here. You might have it defined somewhere else, or you could define it inline in this file. But since this is exported, I can just import it into this file over here. So I'm going to say import customer from, and this was not a default, so we need to surround it in curly braces. And this is going to come from /pages/customers. Now to say what type this is, we don't want to do this. What this does is it renames customer to customer with a capital C. And that's why we're getting all these cannot find name customer. The proper way to do this, it's a little confusing, but we're going to use the colon on the outside, repeat the property, and then say type customer. So let me explain the syntax here. We have an object, and we want to define what type that is in TypeScript. So we're going to build that type structure. It's going to have one property customer, which is of type customer. You can think of it like this: type props, and this being equal to having a single customer of type customer. And then instead of having this object here, we could just say type props. So either one of those should work. However, I'm going to go with the inline variation as I'm familiar with the syntax and I understand it. The last problem we have to deal with is we now have an import conflict because we defined this customer type here, but we're also importing customer from our components. So we could just rename this. Let's say customer component, and then down when we use that, we'll just change this to component. So that should fix all of our errors. Let's check our site. Confirm that everything is working as it should. And now any modifications to the customer component will change all of these, which is quite nice. So for example, if I wanted, I could go into this customer and let's say we added some style, padding being 10. You can see that was an easy way to add padding to each one of these, which if you wanted, you could inspect and see that. So here is our first customer with a padding of 10 pixels. And each one of this is going to have that. So it's a little bit more convenient because we're able to split out the display logic here from the loop logic here. And it simplifies the overall page. But you guys probably understand components at this point if you've been following along with the series, so I'm not going to waste my breath. The next thing I want to do now is take our customer's display and put it inside of a larger page. So you can imagine having a page like this where we have this sidebar and we can visit the customer's page and that information shows up. That's exactly what I want to do in the next episode. So definitely stay tuned for that video, slap the subscribe button, and I'll see you then.